Morning to the listeners of Classic 105.5, 105.9. This morning we have joining us virtually is Minister of Education Emmalin Pierre, bringing us an update on the latest developments. Good morning, Minister Pierre.
Good morning to you, Blossom. Good morning to all of your listeners and, of course, your viewers too.
Happy to have you. Bringing us an update, CXC and Cape, that's the latest or the hottest thing lately. What's the latest development as it relates to the discrepancies, the concerns people have had with results, and so on and so forth with both CSEC and Cape exams?
Okay. Thank you, Blossom. And I just want to give a slight background to all of this and to then tell you what's the latest situation. And the background being that we expected the results. I mean, we all understand what happened before that. Thank God the students were able to do the exam. So let's start from there. We got the results, and as indicated before, we did a press conference to speak about CSEC because we were satisfied that we had sufficient information to speak about CSEC. We still maintain up to this point that our students did far better than they've done in the last 2 years. Our schools did far better than they've done over the last 2 years, and that relates to CSEC. We announced then that we could not give details about CAPE, and that is because we had over 200 students who were ungraded. We explained why they were ungraded. That is because the college entered a batch of students, the last batch of students, after the final deadline, several deadlines given by CXC. And they did say to CXC, even if CXC was willing to accept the grades, that's SBA grades, after the final deadline, they did inform through the ministry that they were having technical difficulties. CXC did say then and repeated after that they were quite willing to work with TAMCC, work with Grenada to ensure that these students would not be affected in terms of not having SBA grades. And so when we noticed that those students, that large batch of students, did not get their grades, we contacted CXC, and within 24 hours, they made a special folder available for Grenada. Those grades were entered. They committed to having the grades, those grades for the SBAs were entered. They committed to having the final student grade for the subject area within 2 weeks, and they kept that promise and they provided those. So we now have those students, over 200 of them, that were ungraded. Those students receive their grades now. Now, let me say this, that both at the CSEC and the CAPE level, it is very normal over the years to have a student or students who feel, or maybe even a teacher who feels that this child should have done better based on past performance. Of course, the teacher is not in the examination room to see what the child submitted. So quite obviously, that student, that teacher is going on past experience. The students may be going on how they feel they answered, right? But remember, with every exam, you are not marking. There's an examiner who marks and make that final determination. So what happened thereafter? Regionally, and it started, I believe, in Guyana, where there were widespread protests as it relates to discrepancies in grades. And colleges throughout the region, and might I say part of the region, also made those widespread claim of discrepancies and concerns. Now, I've always been very reluctant about making those public attacks on CXC, as I've heard. In some cases, even colleagues outside of here, outside of Grenada, making certain statements. And Blossom, I am always very careful to have the facts before I speak. And I listened, and the issues surrounded discrepancies, meaning I should have gotten a grade 1 and I got a 2, and something is wrong with CXC. CXC did something wrong. What did I do? What did the Ministry of Education do? We communicated with schools, we communicated with the college. Should there be any teacher, any student who is concerned about the grade of a particular child, only the child and the teacher, maybe the parent, would have an idea of the individual expected performance. And we said there's an established route, which is you go on the system at the school, at the college, is not at the ministry, at the school, at the college, and you enter that request for review. If it's a query, and I'll give you an example of a possible reason for a query. Your results came back saying you were absent. And I don't believe we had any case like that, but I know that that is normally an area of query. Your report says that you were absent, but you know you were present, you did the exam. That's wrong for a query. If it's your grade, that's a request for a review. So some of those countries raised the concern as it relates to those grades. And we did have some students here who did same, and we walked them through the process. I also had, apart from that, communications directly with CXC. And from my communication with them, I felt it was very important that before we make claims of discrepancies, that we check our business locally, we make sure that we were okay with our SBAs, we make sure that we did everything right, and that we did not have a particular situation where we were making a claim that cannot be substantiated, right? So the region, through the chairman of CXC, appointed an independent committee, well-respected individuals, and I again made the point that I have confidence that this team of independent individuals are going to look into the exams and give us an official report at the regional level that we can now decide where do we go. And as committed, the report was completed and the report was shared with ministers throughout the region, as well as education officials. What is the report generally saying? The report is generally saying that those discrepancies, widespread discrepancies that were referenced, cannot be substantiated based on the review. So if you look at margins of errors, if you look at all that has happened, that cannot be substantiated. And I sat in a meeting of ministers from all of, well, not all, but most of the countries, including Guyana, Trinidad, Barbados. And at no time in that last meeting 2 days ago did I ever hear the word discrepancy mentioned. What I heard generally was the request for the waiver of the fees, which we can speak about. But the report did mention, and that's the second, there are 23 recommendations, but I think if you capture them in a summary, that would be one, I would say. And the second one is that it's obvious that communication among stakeholders may have led to some expectations that were not real. So for example, in the past, CXC would take samples for SBAs. They clearly said this year that because we are not doing paper 2, that they were going to be moderating the SBAs, meaning that if a teacher gave you 15 points, an independent person would review that SBA again and decide if it is 15 or if it is 10 or if it is 5, whatever the case might be. Prior to the noises blossom, and I'll end with this, I spoke to an officer within the education sector in Grenada who serves as a quality assurance officer for the exams. And I was told, Minister, I am very concerned that some of the scores that I've seen assigned to students cannot be justified. And so I am sure that we are going to have situations where the moderated score will be lower than that of the teacher score. So if a teacher gives you full marks, and I hear some students saying, I went in with 100%, how could I not get a 1? Right? Now remember, That is your teacher's assessment of your score. If another teacher or another independent person checks that SBA, the question is, will you get the same score? So we have heard reports of sections of SBAs that were not completed, and this might not be specific to Grenada. I'm speaking regionally now. In some cases where some colleges might not have been moderated before, and so they are used to sending an entire class, 100% for everybody, may have turned out that that class did not get the 100% that they are used to getting. But one of the things coming out of the report is that there needs to be greater support for teachers. And CXC has committed to do some seminars and training with teachers to better equip teachers to assist students with SBAs, to better assist teachers to understand. And remember, I'm speaking this not specific in the content of Grenada, because the report is not speaking about Grenada, it's speaking about the entire region. And so, Blossom, at this stage, in conclusion, we are still saying to students, the deadline has been pushed back to November, the end of the first week in November. We are still saying to students, you strongly believe that you deserve a better grade, you're confident about that, your teacher is confident, make a request for a review. One of the things that the report has also indicated, and CXC has agreed, is that in light of the current situation, CXC should consider a 50% reduction from 30 to 15 US per subject. So that has been agreed upon, and CXC has said so. However, there is the feeling, not just among some ministers, but people in general, that maybe CXC should remove it in total. But I think CXC has struck a reasonable balance to say that we are concerned about the cost implication of an open, free review. But what we are prepared to do, mindful that we are observing that a number of persons who are submitting a request for a review, when independently assessed, their grade is going downwards, we are prepared that anyone who requests a review, if your grade goes downwards, it would remain at the original grade that we issued to you, which I think is a very reasonable compromise in light of the whole COVID situation. So, Blossom, in trying to summarize it as best as I could, this is where we started, this is where we are. And of course, where we intend to go is to encourage our students to do that review if any of them feel that way. So far, we've had just very small numbers. We encouraging our students, and I would say it's 50% proceed. If it goes to 0%, to God be the glory, but I don't think we should sit back and wait and hope that it will go, because remember, CXC is governed by a board, and the board now, the council, would have to make the decision. Are they economically stable enough to grant a review for every student in the region who would like to have a review?
You alluded to it a short while ago, and that was going to be my next question in relation to the call that the ministry issued for students to come forward. You said you have small numbers. Is that what you were expecting in terms of the students who would be seeking review, or you expected more? And when is the deadline? I know CXC's deadline is the end of this month, I believe, but does the ministry have a deadline?
And that has been extended. That has been extended, and students have up to the first week in November to submit those. Now, what is the local situation? The numbers are very small, but there are two groups of numbers that I want to refer to. And I've given instructions to the Chief Education Officer to call an emergency meeting with TAMCC to make sure that students and lecturers fully understand the difference between a query and a review. There's a difference, and I'll give two examples. A query has to do with something that you question and you're asking that is not related to your grade, right? So it means that if I was, as I said, present and my results showed I was absent, I can make a query of that. Now, if I am asking about a grade moving from 3 to 2 or 2 to 1, or I'm not satisfied with my grade, I can now request a review of and CXC has been doing both the paper one as well as the SBA for the review. So they go back to your paper, check over every answer that you submitted. That is what the review entails. What we've noticed from TAMCC is that we do have a long list from students as it relates to queries. So far on the system, and remember I said, who enters a request for a review? It is the school or the college in this case. And so far as of yesterday, from the figure that was given to me, we only have 3 students who have entered a request for a review. Now, as I said before, I requested when I checked again, and I've been checking the numbers, checking what has been coming. I said to the Chief Education Officer that immediately a meeting must be called so that the query and the review can be totally clear to all concerned. Now, if the issue is finance, then that's a different issue. And we have not had anything at all that said that student A or student B or student C is in a position where they are unable. So I really think that at this stage, the most we can do is to further clarify the expectations of CXC as it relates to queries and requests for reviews.
In relation to the call for the waiver of the fees, the report I read this morning stated Guyana, Trinidad, and I believe Barbados and Jamaica as the countries. Is Grenada part of that call as well?
Right. So let me make mention, and there are 2 levels of discussions taking place. The CARICOM level, which includes those countries that you made mention of, and you have the OECS level. And I just want to make a slight differentiation before answering the question directly. At the OECS level, we recognize that our concerns and our issues may be slightly different to that of the other islands in terms of the magnitude of the situation. And of course, from what I understand, from one-on-one conversations with these countries and CXC, it is becoming very obvious that there might be a number of factors playing out there, which I do not want to publicly discuss. And so I believe countries are now going back and realizing that there are things that we have to address locally, right? And that is the most I would say in relation to that. As it relates to the OECS level, all that I said before obtains in that everyone would have students who decide that I'm not satisfied, and we are prepared to follow the procedures and so on. As it relates to ungraded, we recognize in all the cases where there was a student who did not get a grade, that it was not CXC's fault. It was on the part of the local situation, whether it's at the college or the school, where there may have been some technical issues updating that, or maybe there was some lateness understanding the challenges of COVID-19. As it relates to the waiver, now we would be very happy, and we were part of the conversation, and we said it would be great if CXC can just waive all the fees. We would all be happy. But the meeting concluded that the ministers there and the representatives from CXC could not make a decision to waive or not to waive. CXC had to go to its governing body, its council, to present this request and to say, this is what our ministers are. Is it possible that you can just totally remove the fees? And so I believe sometime today or tomorrow, the council will be responding. The body that governs, led by Sir Hilary Beckles, they are going to meet, and I suspect they may have met yesterday or they're meeting today. And I'm hoping by tomorrow, a final decision will be taken. Now, there's just one little thing in my head about the waiver blossom. And I like to think deep and sometimes when you ask for things, you have to ask yourself, what are you really asking for, right? So it's great. I wish, I would love to see CXC remove the waiver totally. But there are two things that we want to be cognizant of. Now, if I got a grade 2 and I'm requesting a waiver I'm requesting a waiver, yes, to get a review to see if I can go up to a 1. Or maybe if I got a 3 and is requesting to see if I can go up to a 2. Now, let us imagine that I'm a student who feel, I really think based on what I did, I should have gotten a grade 3. So I'm not going to bother with a review. Or I think a 2 is reasonable based on how I think I did in the exam. Now, the fact that I've now heard that my grade will not be reduced, you know what I would do? I would, of course, request a review because I know there's no way I'm going to go down. I'm either going to stay the same or go up, which means that the larger percentage of persons in question will now be requesting a review. Now, that's also great, wonderful. But the cost of remarking every person's paper, checking over every person's SBA, common sense tells me that that is going to be very high regionally because we are not just dealing with that small group who feels, I really, really do believe that I need a review. We are now dealing with almost everybody. And the question is CXC able to do this? And then the second question we must all ask, apart from fees, where else does CXC source funds for the running of its operation? So realistically, you might want to ask yourself a couple questions because it means that somebody still has to bear that cost as it relates to. And even if you say locally, right, because you can jump, I've seen some countries say, we're going to pay for it. And then I listen to the ministers in the meeting, I don't know how we're going to pay for it. This difficult times, COVID, we already struggling. We said this, but we just don't know how we're going to do it. No. So it's a difficult conversation with regards to waiver. And that is why I'm happy it's been reduced to 50%, far more manageable. We are encouraging our students to proceed, but we also say another day, you can wait to see if it's totally removed, right? However, we've also said to the college, if students come forward, you know their level of vulnerability, you know their circumstances, make a list of those students, and then let us see if there's anything that can be done to support these particular students.
All right, Minister, let's take a break at this point, and then we're going to come back and continue the discussion. This is To the Point with Minister of Education, Emmalin Pierre. We'll be right back.
National Disaster Management Agency, NADMA, reminds the general public to always be prepared. Make sure you have emergency supplies stocked away just in case. Here is a list to help you and your family. At least 1 gallon of water daily per person for 7 to 10 days. Enough food for at least 3 to 7 days. Non-perishable packaged or canned food and juices. Special items and food for babies and the elderly. Non-electric can opener. Cooking tools and fuel. Paper plates, plastic utensils, paper cups, trash bags and duct tape, useful for cleanup or patching leaks in an emergency, blankets, pillows, first aid kit, medicines, prescription drugs, toiletries, hygiene items, moisture wipes, tarpaulin to cover holes if needed, bleach, water purification tablets, flashlight with extra batteries, battery-operated radio, cash, small bills. Banks and ATMs may not be open or available for extended periods. Keys to house and cars, toys, books and games. Important document in a waterproof container or watertight resealable plastic bag. Up-to-date insurance, medical records, bank account numbers. Keep important phone numbers here. You may know them, but a loved one may not. A pocket knife, nails, a hammer and a rope are important elements. Towels and buckets are useful too if you develop a leak. Vehicle fuel, keep tanks filled.
A message from the National Disaster Management Agency, NADMA.
No, that's not how you cross the pedestrian crossing.
Really? One day I just woke up and I saw pedestrian crosswalks on the road. No one really showed me how to use them properly.
Well, this is how it's done. You never cross before doing these things. They might save your life. First, when you get to the crosswalk, you stop. You look left, you look right. If there's a vehicle coming, you put your hand out, making eye contact with the driver, indicating that you want to cross. And only when the vehicle comes to a complete stop, you quickly cross to the other side.
Stop, look, hand out, eye contact. Wait for pedestrian to cross to the other side, then you happily continue on your journey. This message is brought to you by this group of insurance companies, the Traffic Advisory Body, and the Traffic Department.
Welcome back to The Point, speaking with Minister of Education, Emmalin Pierre. Ms. Pierre, before we go to our viewers and listeners, let me also ask this question as well. With the issues of 2019 to 2020 CXC issues, how will that affect 2020-2021 exams?
Okay. Now, that's a very good question. It will affect if this is prolonged, right? If it goes on for too long, and that's why I'm hoping we can quickly resolve. I commend the committee that they've quickly responded with the report. I trust that in another day we would know, is it 50% waiver, is it 100% waiver, and we can move on as quickly as possible. Of course, the length of time in terms of remarking and so, that would be another factor, but I trust that all decisions to be taken will be taken speedily so that we can move on, because you're absolutely correct in asking that question. If it goes on for too long, it's going to have implication for the students writing next year. You know that not just at the CXC level, even at the school level, the preparation for next year exams started maybe a year, 2 years ago, in some cases, particularly teachers in the preparation of students, SBAs, and so on. Now, CXC, because they've identified from the independent report a number of problems with SBAs. So it's not just about submitting SBAs. It is about ensuring that teachers really fully understand, right? And so CXC would like to spend some time supporting and assisting teachers of the region in that process. Now, I am a bit worried that if this goes on for too long, we're not going to put as much emphasis as we need to place now into the preparation of the batch for next year. And I'll tell you something, Blossom. The students who are preparing next year, you know what their views are? That the students who start the exams this year are at a better advantage than they are. And I can tell you this because they believe that they are most affected by the COVID situation if you compare the two groups of students. And so as much support, and if you listen to the arguments, I have listened to a few of them, and it's difficult to beat them on that argument, right? When you listen to them, they're convinced that they've been home the longest in relation to this issue. They are of the view that they may have to do both paper 1 and paper 2. And so this group of students are of the view that they need all the possible support, and their teachers need all the possible support. It is very obvious from all of this, Blossom. I spoke with one teacher who said to me that she was very confident that this particular child should have gotten 100% on an SBA. Now, speaking to CXC, specific on that child is not anywhere close to 100%. With more than one check made to that SBA. So it means that we have some work to do with our teachers, supporting them, right? Remember, a number of our teachers may not have even been doing this SBA thing for very long. So the more support we can give, the more workshops and sessions that can be done to build their confidence, build their capacity, would also be in the best interest of students who have not yet written the exam.
Were there other issues from students and teachers' perspective when it came to the discrepancies from the exams, outside of missing the deadline to upload on the website and so on? Were there other issues that teachers need to sort out, and how would we work with our local teachers? This one is zoning in on Grenada. How we can work with our teachers to ensure that we don't make that mistake next year, please, the Lord.
Right. So the report is not country specific. But reading from the report, I'm quite sure that all of the issues there can be applied to a local situation, right? So you would have had cases, for example, in the report when it spoke about school-related issues. So incorrect registration number for students, right, by schools. You also had non-submission of scores in some cases. And I want to reiterate that this section of the report is not speaking specific to Grenada, but I'm sure we may have cases that feature there, albeit very small numbers, right? In cases where no SBA should be entered, 0 was entered, right? Things like incorrect assignment of candidates to group for group SBAs, missing documents. I've heard of incomplete SBAs, meaning a section, right? And maybe before we could have gotten away with that because it was a sample group that you're using, right? Corrupt files submitted, so the file that was submitted could not be used, right? Inadequate number of SBAs submitted. So if that teacher or that group had to submit X amount, Y amount was submitted. So there were various issues across the region that led to some of those concerns. And that is why I've always said, before we speak, before we decide what the problem is, let's research, let's get the facts, let's go deeper into it. Now, it means that with those things being the case, there has to be an increased vigilance at all levels as it relates to what is being submitted. So there are things we probably got away with in the past. So it means we may have to double check. So one principal actually said to me that I need to probably check a little more, right? Maybe at the registrar level, there might be need for a double check-in of some things, right? Asking of a few more questions to make sure that everything is A-OK before it gets to CXC, right? And of course, there were a few issues that were mentioned at the internal CXC level, the conversion of file failure, because of course, if the file is corrupt, then conversion of the file would become an issue. Removal of cover sheets, the changes encountered in uploading files and addition to files, right? So the independent review would have identified the school-specific issues, those issues that relate to the school, those issues that relate to CXC directly, right? And so the Ministry of Education will work to provide as much support as we can, depending on CXC as well, to give additional support for our teachers, additional support wherever it's possible. We are going to be indicating to schools, you know, if there's a request for a school-specific training, if there's a request for otherwise, we are going to give all the necessary support, even if we have to bring in external help to give the additional support. I believe we have to look for that. Even if, as I said, we've done well, we want to make sure that we do what we have to do even better.
At this point, we're going to invite our viewers and listeners who may have questions for Minister Pierre. 435-2041, that's the landline number. That's also the WhatsApp. Please, only written messages on WhatsApp. You can also post your comments, questions, queries, concerns respectfully on the Facebook and YouTube page and channel. So let's go to our first caller. Good morning, caller.
Yeah, good morning, Loss, and to public servant Emmalin Pierre. Yeah, you're a public servant, and I pay your salary. Anyway, that's not the issue here. I'm very disturbed when I heard that one of the complaints is that the T.A. Marisha Community College, because I think I'd raised that before, and I get a big slap in my face, did not submit the people SBAs or however you call it, whatever it is, and as a result, it was ungraded. If I am correct, or if I hear the correct thing, subject to correction, you have a other person who is specifically was at that time in charge of TA Marisho services. That person is in the name of Public Servant Pamela Moses. How is it that public servant did not? It was careless of her not to submit those children, SBAs, that they had to be actually demonstrating in front of the college. And you see, what I'm saying is that public servant is supposed to be responsible for, because that is on her territory. So I just find that is reckless, irresponsible, and incompetent. And also I want to address the issue of the tablets that we spoke about some time before. Okay, I know it might be a new system, and there might be teething problems. But there's also this allegation that some of the things might not be necessarily, might be not good, bad. So I'm wondering if when we procure these tablets, or however you call them, if we what is the arrangement, if you have any things in terms of servicing, if it's not second-hand equipment, because sometimes you give people contract, they come nice, and they give you old thing.
Okay.
So that's just my concern, because it's taxpayers' money.
Thank you very much, caller. Minister?
All right. So I want to respond to the first question, and thank you very much for those two, what I consider very important questions. And I consider them very important because it gives the opportunity to bring clarity. So let us speak first about the SBAs, right? And I do not think it is fair for me or for any person to ascribe blame to anyone in this particular situation. And by no means I can think of a reason why I can ascribe blame to Minister Moses, particularly in this situation. I don't know if the caller has heard my explanations of this for the last month, thereabout. A percentage of the students came back ungraded, which means that other students came back graded. All of our secondary school students came back graded, but there was a batch, meaning a group of students that came back ungraded. So there must be a reason why all these other students were graded and this batch was not graded. I explained before that that batch was the last batch of students entered on the system, or was, well, attempted to be entered. Now, very important to note, and I want to say at this juncture, that I recognize the efforts of everyone that was involved in this process, and I will not be bold and brave to the point that I would point a finger at any person, not even the lecturers. I would not do it, because I consider that period to have been a very difficult period. And it is the reason why I will not name anyone for blame in this situation. This happened. Unfortunately, it happened. And I'm very grateful that we have been given an opportunity to solve the problem. During the period of the COVID and the lockdown, there were lecturers who traveled from one end of the country to another end of the country to find students, to help students, to get students to complete. And so I'm aware that there are persons who made tremendous efforts to get, remember, this was a period of the lockdown, generally speaking. This was a period when people were not allowed to move and to be in school and all of that. And that is the period we're talking about when people were finalizing SBAs. So there were tremendous efforts made. I cannot sit here and say everybody's effort was equal, but I would be very careful about pointing a finger at anyone. So I'm in a mood of appreciation for the efforts that were made. There are students who had to go through very difficult times to complete those SBAs, to get it to the lecturers and all of that. And so I recognize them. Now, what happened then, as it relates to that batch, as I said before, in submitting the scores, the results of the SBAs, the college experienced some technical difficulties. In other words, it was not uploading. So they enter in it, but it's not going through. And so immediately, they drew this to the attention of the Ministry of Education. We applaud them for that. They did the right thing. Now, the Ministry of Education immediately notified CXC that the college was having this problem. And we felt very confident and comfortable that this situation could be solved when they said to us, do not worry, we are going to make accommodation, special accommodation for the college. And so that being the case, examining all the facts, all of the condition, the context of the situation, I would definitely say that I cannot find it in my heart to blame anyone for this situation and to say that I commend all of those who were part of the corrective action, immediate response to this particular situation, including CSC. As it relates to the tablets, I want to say this now. If you purchase 5 of anything, it is quite possible that you might have a defect in the 5. And we've all had those experiences with things that we purchase for ourselves personally. This is not 5 that we are purchasing. In this particular case, those tablets, we're talking 10,000. 10,000 devices purchased at one time that was specifically manufactured for Grenada. Now, obviously, in this case, you are going to make some arrangement, and I totally agree with the caller that this is totally, absolutely necessary. That's common sense right there. That you must make some accommodation for defects. So in transporting, you may have a broken something in whatever, you may have some challenge. And so it is why we took that time during those first few weeks to open every box and examine every device. Why? Because any defects from the manufacturer as it relates to traveling that is obvious at this stage is automatically replaced. So I believe we had about 100 and something devices, either maybe cracked or it was missing a part or something. And those immediately, there is a buffer stock to accommodate for that. Now, when the device is handed over, so the team inspected, and now it's time to hand over to the parent. There's a section on the form that identifies that this parent or this teacher would have also physically checked the device themselves for any obvious visible sign that there is any issue with the device at all, and then they would sign. Now, the ministry also, through that arrangement, has arrangement in place for spare parts, buffer stock as it relates to additional devices as part of that arrangement. But of course, one of the things that, and the company did say to us, Minister, you're moving too fast. And I said, we can't go slower, right? But one of the things that would be normal in a project like this is that you take it even slower than we're going now, so that each group you would get to work with them, go through the troubleshooting, you would go through those technical issues that is necessary when you're implementing a project like this. But with our circumstances, if this was not COVID, we would do this totally different. We would probably do one form per month, right? So what we've done is we said, if you have any challenge at all with a device, there's a number that we gave to every parent as they collected their device that they call in to what is called the help desk. Now that help desk enters every request that comes in, every single one. And I also get a general report as to the percentages of those requests that have been addressed. Very, very high percentages because the issues are very minor issues. And those issues are generally because persons have not had that direct engagement on the ground, which we are now resolving. We've engaged a person for every secondary school that will be on site from this week, and that person would be that technical go-to person if there's any challenge at all that a student would have. Our intention was to have those persons in the school from the very day that we started distribution, but that was not practically possible because those persons were so essential to helping us with the distribution. And so during the distribution, we are facilitating that plus addressing any question, any queries, anything at all that a person would want to find out. So I want to say, and thanks for the opportunity, caller, to explain that too, that out of this week, every school would have a person so that there's no need for a parent to call the Ministry of Education or to even come to the Ministry of Education, as we've had one or two cases in question. So I just want to assure the caller that we are very, very comfortable, and we are not the only country that is doing this particular project with this particular company, with this particular device. And we are going to continue to work with our students and our parents. The response, the feedback in terms of the benefits that students are actually already having from those devices are tremendous. I was speaking very recently to a Form 5 student, and he said, Miss, I was just asking him generally, and he said, Miss, one of the things I cannot get over is the fact that I can take my tablet and in physics, I can check back my Form 3 book and my Form 3 content, which I don't have at home. I don't have anywhere because I've given away those books already, right? So I believe whatever the minor issues, we have the team in place that will address all of those as we move forward.
Good morning, caller. Thank you for your patience. Good morning.
Good morning, Blossom, and good morning to the minister and to your followers. The matter of the CXC results. This is a lot more complicated than many of us may think. Because as far as I know, having been an educator and somebody who mark and score results, the ultimate result you get is not the outcome of your personal work. It is usually the sum consideration of everybody else's work. Because what normally happens, these things are put on, the scores are put on a bell curve, and a certain percentage will be at that middle of that curve. A certain percentage who did worse will be put on one end, and those who did extremely well at another end. So they have to compare all the scores to determine my score. Now, if you're asking them to change my score, technically speaking, depending on how many persons' scores are attempted to be changed, it may affect the whole dynamics of all the other persons' scores. So it is unfortunate that it has gotten that far. Based on what the minister said, attempts were made. But once you have actually assigned scores, changing scores, to me, it has an impact. So the people who already got scores, technically, their scores are supposed to be revised too. Because the score that you're now changing was as a result of considering all the scores on that bell curve. So it is very, very ticklish, it's technical, but I just hope that at the end of the day, the folks get what they deserve. But it is not as simple as just changing a mark from 20 to 30. It's very much more complicated than that. Thank you very much. Have a good day.
Thank you, caller. Minister?
Well, I would just say, in line with what how the caller ended, that this whole situation, I mean, it's really unfortunate that we are in this situation. And I would just agree too that I really do hope that we cross this bridge very quickly. I understand that a person may feel strongly, and sometimes we have to put ourselves even in the individual situation. And if I feel strongly about something, some people have their own aspirations, their own dreams. So, for example, someone asked me, well, why would a student who got 18 subjects want to query 2 subjects, meaning from a 2 to a 1? And I said, don't say that. You don't know what his aspiration, his dream, you don't know how it's affecting him personally. So it's quite okay. But as the caller said, this thing is complex, it's complicated, and I just hope that we would quickly get through it, and that at the end, it would be a win-win situation for everybody concerned. But you know, Blossom, talking about win-win, I think we've already won coming out of this situation, and I'll tell you why. I only made general comments regarding the report, but if you study the report, I believe that we would all be better off because of what happened, because of this situation. And it reminds me of, out of everything that might be considered bad, there is good that can come out of it. Because I believe out of this process, our students in the future have an opportunity to do better. Our teachers would come out of this far more competent than they currently are in the area of SBAs and marking and so on. And so at the end of this haul, CXC, I believe, would also be a stronger organization because of this. So I think sometimes what we have to do, as we address the problems, we deal with the problems, we also look at what are the opportunities that we can get out of this. And I can see many coming out of this situation.
There's a WhatsApp question asking, how does removing the physical distancing in our schools help our students?
Well, very good question. And I would start the answer to that with the conversation that we've had publicly. I'm sure in your position as a host, you've heard it over and over. Why are some children going to school 2 days? Why are some children going to school 3 days? Why children can't go back to school as normal? And I had to explain to one person quite recently because they did not see the correlation. The individual said to me, I don't understand what physical distancing in the classroom has to do with my child going to school every day. Well, it has everything to do with that, because the direct correlation is that the lower the distancing in the classroom is, the more students that can go to school every day. That's a direct correlation. And so it means that for us, after we've done that phased-in approach for about a month, and we said, okay, now we are moving deeper into the academics, what is the biggest challenge that we have now? The biggest challenge was that every student cannot go to school every day. For some school, that has been happening from the 7th of September. In some school, every child has been given an opportunity to go to school every day from the 7th of September. And in some schools, that was not possible because of the physical distancing. So the next thing for the Ministry of Education to do was to approach the Ministry of Health and the COVID-19 Committee and the Cabinet of Grenada to say that we are faced with this challenge. It is very similar to the challenge of public officers going back to work in the context of public transportation. And we said to the Ministry of Health, all concerned, based on the analysis of the data we've collected from schools and from public feedback, we believe that if it is safe, reasonably safe, for students to remove the physical distancing while they're in the classroom, our ministry believes that our stakeholders will be generally comfortable with that. And I'm talking about data we've collected from all the schools and from public feedback. We would not do anything, we cannot do anything without the approval from those groups that I referred to. The Cabinet, COVID-19 Committee, the Ministry of Health. And we would not want to do anything at all if any of these groups are uncomfortable from a health perspective. And so what was said is that the risk is not zero, quite obviously, but we believe that if every student, and this is the feedback that we got as Ministry of Education, if every student in that classroom is wearing their mask, the teacher is at the front of the classroom, and the fact that we do not want our students to be denied an opportunity to continue their education face-to-face, we are allowing the Ministry of Education to remove the physical distancing in the classroom. So that removal of physical distancing does not apply for outside of the classroom. And schools have been informed of that. The permission was granted to remove the physical distancing in the classroom where students are seated in a lesson for one reason only, to allow every child to be given a face-to-face opportunity in the classroom every day. Now, I want to appeal and we continue to appeal to schools, to students, to parents, encourage children to continue wearing their masks in the classroom, out of the classroom, wherever they are. We want to appeal that all of the physical distancing, all of the protocols remain. And we said that to school. So how you go to the tuck shop has not changed. How you behave when you go on a break has not changed. The sanitizing, all of those things, nothing else changed, except when you're sitting in a classroom, taking in a lesson, we're saying if the class used to have 25 students, we are giving permission for the 25 students to return to school, right? And I would assume that your answer and your question and more has been answered by that explanation, Blossom.
Yes, it was answered. Minister, we've quickly run out of time. Thank you so much for shedding an update on the proceedings with CXC. We thank you, appreciate it. Have yourself a good day today.
You're more than welcome.
Thank you so much. Minister of Education Emmalin, Pierre, an update on CXC, CSEC and CAPE results, as well as physical distancing in school, among other matters. We thank her for being our guest, and thank you, our viewers and listeners, for tuning in. It's time for Joseph to take over with Mid-Morning Buzz. I'll be back with you tomorrow morning, God willing. Have yourselves a safe, productive, and wonderful Wednesday.